You know, when you look out your window, you probably just assume you're seeing a direct live feed of reality.
Right, like it's just objectively there.
Yeah, exactly. A tree is a tree, a road is a road. You trust the glass. But what if there's actually an invisible control room standing between you and that view?
That is a terrifying thought, but yeah.
It is. And today we are taking a deep dive into a massive, frankly mind-bending stack of research that suggests the world you experience is, well, entirely engineered.
Engineered from the ground up.
Right. We're looking at notes deconstructing 10 different sources, spanning modern psychology, covert history, and artificial intelligence. And they are all synthesized into this one overarching meta-framework called the reality engine.
And I know it sounds like a heavy stack of material, but the mission today is actually incredibly practical for you listening.
Yeah.
We want to pull back the curtain on that control room.
We want to see the gears turning.
Exactly. We're uncovering the hidden information processing loop that actually constructs our modern reality. So we're going to map out this journey by exploring reality as a three-layer stack.
Okay, lay it out for us.
First, we have the self, which acts as the interpreter. Second is the machine, which is the amplifier. And third, we have the system, which is the shaper of our collective world.
I love that structure. But real quick before we jump in, a quick disclaimer. The sources we're looking at today use some heavy political and economic frameworks, like Marxism, to analyze how information flows.
Which can be a very loaded term for people.
Oh, absolutely. So to be completely clear to you listening, we're not taking a political side here. We aren't endorsing these ideologies at all. We're just examining them impartially, like as analytical tools presented in the source text.
Right, we're just using the diagnostic tools the authors use to see how the engine works.
Perfect. So let's start right at layer one, the inner world. The self. The research actually refers to this layer as the sieve.
The sieve, yeah.
Yeah, because before we can even begin to understand how, like, big tech or society shapes the world, we have to understand how we process raw data into meaning. And these sources just take an absolute sledgehammer to our traditional understanding of identity.
They really do. I mean, the synthesis tracks this historical shift. We used to have this healthy Enlightenment era individualism, right, where you had an inherent stable self that you went out into the world to discover.
Right, like finding your true self.
Exactly. But it says we've shifted into this pathological self-obsession driven by social media and consumer psychology.
Yeah.
The core insight here is that the self is no longer discovered. It is constantly constructed.
Constantly constructed.
Yeah. You don't have an intrinsic, immovable core. Instead, you have this performative identity that is constantly being built and rebuilt based on validation loops.
Okay, wait, let me stop you there because that is a massive claim.
It's a lot to take in.
If myself is just a constant performance for external validation, how do the sources explain, deeply held moral convictions? Or what about introverts who actively avoid external validation?
That's a really good question.
Are they really arguing we have zero intrinsic core?
It's a crucial pushback. But the sources aren't saying you lack biological traits or a baseline personality. What they're arguing is that the narrative of who you are, the story you tell yourself and others, is a construct.
Oh, I see. So the framing is what's built.
Right. Even the introvert's rejection of society is a constructed identity in relation to the world. You are taking raw noise and filtering it. That is the mechanism of the sieve.
The filter itself.
Exactly. Raw reality hits you, and your identity acts as a filter that turns that noise into a named reality. You only experience the world after it passes through the mesh of your own biases, desires, and self-image.
Okay, let's unpack this with an analogy. It's less like wearing tinted glasses you forgot about, and more like being a soundboard engineer at a live concert.
Oh, I like that.
Right. You've got all this raw audio coming in from the stage. That's reality. But your identity is sitting there at the mixing desk, aggressively muting certain frequencies.
Like ignoring compliments.
Yes. Your negativity bias is just pulling the fader down on anything good and boosting other frequencies like perceived threats. By the time the music actually hits the speakers, it sounds completely different from what was actually played.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. And the research applies this exact soundboard concept to our most fundamental emotions. I mean, there's an entire section breaking down the mechanics of love.
Oh, wow. How does that fit in?
Well, we culturally view love as this magical force you just passively receive from someone else, right? But the synthesis argues that feeling loved is actually a cognitive skill.
Wait, meaning you have to generate it yourself?
Exactly. You filter others' actions through your own emotional habits. If your internal soundboard is set to mute affection, maybe because of past trauma or insecurity, someone could be screaming that they love you and you literally wouldn't process the frequency.
That is so wild.
The absence of love in your life might not be an actual absence. It might just be a misperception.
Which honestly changes the stakes entirely. If we are responsible for mixing our own reality, then the questions we ask ourselves become incredibly important.
They do. They shape the filter.
But society aggressively rewards certainty. We want the definitive answer right now.
We do. But the sources point out that demanding a premature answer actually limits your exploration. We are trained to treat a question like a math problem to be solved and discarded.
Get the answer and move on.
Right. But the shift here is to treat a good question as a compass. It doesn't give you a destination. It gives you a direction for your identity formation. If you embrace the uncertainty, your sieve becomes much more adaptable.
But even with an adaptable sieve, we are still profoundly subjective. We are walking, vulnerable soundboards.
Very vulnerable.
So what happens when you take that highly subjective, easily influenced inner world and you plug it into a massive automated stadium PA system?
Well, then you cross the threshold into layer 2 of the reality engine, the machine.
The amplifier.
And this is where exponential technology completely alters the human equation. We tend to view tools historically as things that just help us execute our existing tasks a bit faster.
Right. A hammer helps you hit a nail. A tractor helps you plow a field.
Exactly. But the sources argue that artificial intelligence is a fundamental step change. It expands human agency to the point where it redefines what action even means. AI is described here as an alien collaborator.
What does that actually look like in practice, though? Because alien collaborator sounds super sci-fi, but we're really just talking about software.
Let's break down the mechanics. AI doesn't just execute a command. It explores the latent space of your intention.
Latent space?
Yeah, it's a concept in machine learning that represents all the hidden possibilities between data points. Imagine you have a vague idea for a painting. You want, like, a futuristic city at dusk. If you use a traditional tool, like Photoshop, you still have to manually draw every single line. But with an alien collaborator, you input that vague intent, and the AI fills in the lighting, the physics, the architectural styles you hadn't even considered.
Oh, wow.
It explores this vast, hidden space of possibilities that you couldn't even articulate and generates a fully realized output.
So it's taking the raw intent from my subjective sieve and just fleshing it out completely. But, that requires a staggering amount of processing power.
It's staggering. And that brings us to the physical reality of the machine layer. All of these software dreams are entirely limited by hardware reality.
Yeah.
The chips, the data centers, the sheer energy grid.
The physical stuff.
Right. Intelligence itself is being industrialized. The sources point out a deep psychological driver behind this, too. Humanity's pursuit of infinite computation reflects our drive to transcend our biological limits.
We want to be limitless.
Exactly. But the danger is that we treat more compute as inherently better, without considering that this quest for infinite intelligence is rapidly outrunning human wisdom.
Because the capability of the machine is fundamentally alien to us. The research makes a really sharp distinction about how AI actually processes information, right?
It does. It points out that AI performs cognition without consciousness. It does not think like us at all. It uses vast mathematical pattern recognition across billions of parameters.
Not human reasoning or logic.
Exactly. But because its simulation of thought is virtually indistinguishable from actual human thought, it forces us to redefine intelligence. We are suddenly no longer the sole benchmark for cognition.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me. If AI has no intrinsic meaning, if it doesn't actually understand anything it's generating, it's just predicting the next mathematical token, isn't it basically a massive automated megaphone for our own biases?
That is the big question.
Like, if we feed it our soundboard mixed view of the world, does it actually change the message or just make it terrifyingly loud?
That is the core danger of the machine layer.
Yeah.
It just makes it loud. It has no moral compass. It takes the intent from the sieve, whether that intent is profound truth, blatant manipulation, or sheer confusion, and it just scales it infinitely.
So we have this vulnerable interpreter, the self, hooked up to this infinite amplifier, the machine. That logical flow leads us directly to the third layer.
The system.
Right. What happens when that incredibly loud, amplified message actually hits society?
It forms a new collective reality. It constructs layer 3, or what the synthesis calls the monolith. This is where individual perception and machine amplification harden into a shared reality.
So the subjective becomes objective.
Effectively, yeah.
Yeah.
The system layer is where narrative shape perception before logic even has a chance to activate. The battle is no longer for truth, it's a battle for belief. Truth is completely malleable.
I want to dig into the mechanics of how a narrative actually bypasses logic, because the sources provide some wild historical context for this.
Oh, the CIA stuff.
Yes. During the Cold War, the CIA literally smuggled banned literature, like the novel Dr. Zhivago, into the Soviet Union. They used a book club as a covert weapon. Why drop novels instead of propaganda flyers or bombs?
Because a story operates beneath our conscious defense mechanisms. If you drop propaganda leaflets telling people their government is oppressive, their ideological defenses immediately reject it.
Right, they see right through it.
But a novel invites the reader to empathize with characters, to imagine a completely different way of living. By exposing readers to alternative worldviews through fiction, you foster dissent through imagination.
It sneaks in the back door.
Exactly. It proves that intellectual freedom has to precede political freedom. Control of ideas is the ultimate control of reality, because stories quietly destabilize regimes far more effectively than direct confrontation.
It's like narrative acts as a covert operating system for society. You install the story, and the behavior just naturally follows, and we see this exact same mechanism operating in our modern information ecosystem.
Oh, constantly.
The synthesis uses the Y2K panic as a prime example of this, right?
Y2K perfectly illustrates how the monolith functions.
Yeah.
I mean, the technical bug was real, sure, but the apocalyptic panic was entirely engineered by narrative.
Right. The media amplified technological anxiety, projecting our deeper existential fears onto a computer calendar bug.
Exactly. The perceived risk completely swallowed the actual danger. It proved that fear spreads infinitely faster than facts.
Because fear triggers the most primal frequencies on our internal soundboards, and that is how the system layer operates. People don't act on objective reality. They act on perceived consensus.
That's the key right there. Perceived consensus.
If the media, the institutions, and the algorithms are all broadcasting the narrative that the world is ending at midnight, you will behave as if the world is ending, regardless of what the underlying code says.
Right, you just follow the crowd.
So, what does this all mean? We've essentially created an inescapable reality loop. The system feeds us a narrative. We interpret it through the biased soundboard of our sieve. We feed our reaction into the machine, which amplifies it exponentially, and that becomes the new system narrative.
The loop just keeps feeding itself.
It's like being in a giant pitch-black theater where everyone starts laughing at a joke they didn't even hear, simply because the surround sound system is blasting a laugh track. We just assume something funny happens, so we laugh too, which feeds more noise into the microphones, making the laugh track even louder.
That captures the feedback loop perfectly. It's an endless iterative cycle between human vulnerability and machine scale.
But this brings up a massive physical problem. If this reality engine is constantly running, churning out narratives, filtering them, exploring latent space, amplifying them, who is actually doing the work to keep the loop spinning?
Right. Energy doesn't just materialize out of nowhere.
Exactly.
And this is where the research introduces one of its most critical concepts, the doctrine of invisible labor. This is the systemic tendency of society to take absolutely essential, exhausting tasks and categorize them as non-work or leisure or simply noise.
Just writing it off entirely.
Yeah, which renders that labor entirely unpaid and socially unrecognized.
Give me a concrete example of this invisible labor. What does it look like?
Well, the sources categorize it into 3 areas of energy drain. First is emotional labor. That's managing your own feelings or absorbing the emotional fallout of others just to keep a workplace or a relationship functioning.
Oh, that is exhausting.
It is. Second is cognitive labor, or the mental load. This is the executive functioning required to keep life moving. It's the person in the household tracking what's in the fridge, anticipating when the kids need new shoes, scheduling appointments.
And it leaves no physical trace.
None, until the person stops doing it and then everything falls apart.
Wow. And the third area?
Shadow work. This is the unpaid labor consumers do for corporations.
Oh, wait, like self-checkout kiosks. I was at the grocery store yesterday, literally screaming at an automated scanner because of an unexpected item in the bagging area. Yes. You are scanning your own groceries.
I'm bagging them, I'm acting as my own IP support, and I don't even work for the supermarket.
Exactly. You are performing shadow work. Society functions by ignoring the true energy cost of maintaining itself. And in the era of the reality engine, this doctrine has evolved into the realm of what they call ghost workers.
Ghost workers, who are they?
To make our AI look like an autonomous, magical alien collaborator, there is a massive, hidden, global workforce. We were talking about thousands of people, often in developing nations, doing data labeling for pennies.
Like manually tagging things?
Yeah, manually drawing boxes around pedestrians in millions of photos so a self-driving car can learn what a human looks like. Or they are performing deeply traumatizing content moderation, viewing the absolute worst violence on the internet to clean the feed for the rest of us. So the system extracts all this human suffering and manual effort, labels it as just background noise so it doesn't have to properly compensate anyone, and then presents the clean algorithm as this technological miracle.
Precisely. Now, as the sources analyze this dynamic of extracting unpaid value from invisible workers, they rely on some heavy political economic frameworks, specifically Marxism.
Right, and just to remind everyone listening, we are just looking at this as a lens.
Exactly. Traditional Marxism focuses heavily on surplus value, the system extracting profit from the unpaid hours of the worker.
Right.
But the synthesis asks us to pressure test this. Is the reality engine actually practicing information Marxism? Because traditional Marxism is fundamentally materialist. It cares about finite resources. If we were talking about land, steel, or factories, physical capital is subtractive.
Subtractive, meaning if I have the gold bar, you do not have the gold bar. If I eat the loaf of bread, you can't eat it.
Exactly. The goal of that traditional system is to seize the physical means of production. But the reality engine trades in information, and information behaves completely differently than physical capital. Information is additive.
How so?
If I share a concept or a meme with you, I haven't lost it. We both have it. In fact, its power and value actually increase the more it is distributed.
Wait, that's a massive distinction. So applying a strictly materialist framework to a digital reality engine leads to a logical trap.
It does. Which is why the sources suggest transitioning from Marxism into the lens of systems metaphysics, specifically cybernetics.
Okay, cybernetics?
Yeah. In a cybernetic system, the goal is not ownership of the physical factory. The goal is steering the feedback loop.
What does steering mean in a practical sense?
It means controlling the flow of information. You don't need to own the servers of a massive social media platform to wield immense power. You just need to steer what goes viral. The sources argue we are not just worker bees in a digital factory. We're symbolic architects.
Symbolic architects. I like the sound of that.
Every time you interpret an event, every time you name an emotion or share an opinion, you are generating value from the void. You are building the very architecture of meaning that allows the system to exist.
Wait, let me wrap my head around this. If information grows when it's shared, we aren't fighting over a finite pie like traditional economics. This is basically digital alchemy.
Digital alchemy, exactly.
We are spinning meaning out of thin air just by naming things. But here is the terrifying friction in all this. If we are spinning this value out of thin air, are we actually liberating our thoughts? Or are we just becoming unpaid data entry clerks for our own subjective reality?
That is the million-dollar question.
Are we just feeding our own energy into the machine so it can build a bigger monolith?
That is the ultimate tension of the modern age.
Mm.
If you stop naming things, if you stop feeding your interpretations into the loop, the reality engine stalls. Your invisible labor is literally keeping the universe of meaning alive.
Wow.
But because information naturally clusters around massive hubs of distribution, a few major monoliths, search algorithms, media empires, tech platforms, will always command the vast majority of collective attention. They capture the meaning you spun out of thin air and monetize it.
So we are doing the invisible cognitive labor to keep the matrix running, and they are harvesting the output. Which means the entire meta-insight of this deep dive fundamentally redefines what power actually is. Power is no longer about controlling people directly with physical force or owning the most steel.
Not at all.
Power comes from controlling the inputs to our interpretation loops.
It maps perfectly to our three layers. To control the reality engine, a modern entity needs three things. First, interpretive power. That targets the self layer. It's the ability to define the vocabulary people use to understand their own lives, shaping that internal soundboard.
Right. Second, computational power. That targets the machine layer. It's the ability to scale that thought and action infinitely using AI. And third, narrative power. That targets the system layer. It's the ability to codify those amplified thoughts into shared belief systems and cultural consensus.
So whoever integrates those three forms of power shapes identity, scales influence, and quite literally defines reality.
They own the engine.
It is so wild to trace this all the way back to the beginning. We started by talking about looking out a window, assuming we're just seeing what's naturally there.
Yeah.
But everything we've unpacked today, from the soundboards of our constructed identities to the alien collaboration of AI exploring our latent space, right up to the giant theater of society telling us what to fear, it proves that the view is entirely engineered.
It really forces a profound realization. Reality is no longer an objective landscape we simply walk through and discover. It is an iterative loop that we are actively constructing even when we don't realize we're doing the work. It really is. So next time you feel a sudden, intense emotion about a headline on your feed, or, you use an AI tool to brainstorm an idea, take a step back and ask yourself, who actually designed the interface you are using? Are you steering the reality engine, or are you just the raw material feeding the machine?
A vital question for anyone navigating the modern world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for taking this deep dive with us. Remember that window you're looking out of, check the glass, it might just be a screen.